You know that feeling when you walk into a room?
Well,
Maybe it's a family dinner, maybe a work meeting, and there's just this thing sitting in the middle of it all.
right. It's huge. It's awkward.
It's completely obvious, but everyone just, agrees to pretend it's not there. To just stare at the wallpaper instead.
We're talking about the classic idea of the elephant in the room.
Exactly. And we usually use that for like a social issue or a failing business plan nobody wants to mention. But today we're doing a deep dive that takes that idea somewhere else entirely.
Somewhere pretty unexpected. We're looking at a theological reflection on the biblical book of Hosea.
Right, specifically on this one single sentence in Hosea chapter 7. And the source material we're working from argues that this elephant dynamic is the perfect diagnosis for the spiritual collapse of an entire nation.
It's a heavy premise.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about, hidden sins or skeletons in the closet.
No.
We're talking about a society where the wrongdoing was the elephant. Massive, undeniable, destroying everything.
And everyone had just decided to live with it.
Yeah. And that's a terrifying kind of blindness. So our mission today is to unpack this reflection. It never occurs to them that I remember all their sin and figure out how a whole nation gets, well, spiritual amnesia.
And what that means for us today.
Because the psychology behind it, the way we normalize things that should shock us, that hasn't changed.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The northern kingdom of Israel. When we hear that, I think we picture something pretty ancient, maybe primitive. But the source paints a much grittier picture.
Oh, it's chaotic.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, this is a nation in free fall. Politically, you've got kings murdering other kings for the throne, constant instability.
So not just a few bad apples.
Not at all. The corruption was woven into everyday life. The analysis points to a few key things. First, idolatry was just normal.
Like, it wasn't shocking anymore.
No, it was just there. Second, justice was basically gone. The courts were just a tool for the rich. And third, the source describes this culture of just, casual violence and deceit. Neighbors exploiting neighbors was just how you did business.
Okay, but history is full of that stuff.
Right.
What makes this moment so different? Why does the source single this out as the elephant?
That's the crucial distinction the author makes. The source argues the most alarming part wasn't the presence of the sin.
It was the absence of awareness.
The blindness. Exactly. Hosea 7.2 gives God's diagnosis. It never occurs to them that I remember all their sin.
It never occurs to them. That's a psychological statement. It means they aren't even thinking about it.
It's a profound cognitive dissonance. The text is clear. These people hadn't become atheists. They didn't deny God existed. They probably still went to the festivals, offered sacrifices.
So they checked the yes box on the census for believes in God.
Intellectually, yes, but functionally, they were living like atheists, like God was blind or deaf or just didn't care.
That's the numbness.
The source calls it a dull conscience, a numb heart.
The elephant is in the room, wrecking the place, and they're just walking around it like it's a piece of furniture.
And that numbness is the real danger. It's like a warning system that's broken. When you hide a sin, at least you know it's wrong. You feel that guilt. But when it never occurs to you, you've lost the ability to self-correct.
Which brings us to the scary question.
Yeah.
How do you get there? It must be a slow drift.
It is. And the source pivots here to the modern application. And it uses a phrase I think is perfect. It calls it the quiet compromise.
Quiet compromise. I like that. It sounds so harmless.
And that's the point. The struggle for most people isn't this, outright rebellion. We don't wake up and decide to be villains.
No, we're the good guys in our own story.
We drift. And that drift happens when we take a good thing, a truth about God, and we twist it.
Like what?
Like God is love or God is gracious. We take that truth and turn it into a permission slip. The logic goes, God is love, so he's nice. If he's nice, he just wants me to be happy, so he won't mind if I... And then you fill in the blank.
It's the God's love means God's indifference fallacy.
Exactly. We assume that because grace is real, holiness must be optional.
But there has to be something that reinforces that, right? You can't just tell yourself that forever.
And that's the other side of the trap the source points out. The delay in judgment.
The lack of immediate consequences.
Right. You make a compromise, you cut a corner, and nothing happens. The sky doesn't fall.
In fact, maybe life gets a little better. You make more money.
So the human brain concludes, well, I guess that was okay. We mistake God's silence for God's approval.
That is a heavy line from the source. Do not mistake God's silence for God's approval.
In that gap between the action and the consequence, we get comfortable. We start thinking the elephant must be a permanent fixture. Maybe it's even holding the roof up.
But the roof is rotting from the inside.
Exactly. And that's when God, through Hosea, breaks the silence and says, hey, I remember.
Let's dig into that word remember, because to me, I remember all their sins sounds petty. It sounds like God's holding a grudge.
It does. If a person says that, it's usually not a good thing.
Right. I forgive, but I don't forget, which means I absolutely do not forgive.
But the source is really careful here. It argues God's memory isn't about resentment. He's not waiting for you to slip up so he can punish you.
So, why remember? Why is that the key word?
He remembers because he's holy, yes, but also because he loves his people too much to ignore what's destroying them.
Okay, connect those dots. How is remembering my sin an act of love?
Think of a good doctor. If you have a serious medical condition, do you want a doctor who politely forgets about it so you don't feel bad?
No, of course not. That's malpractice.
A good doctor remembers every symptom, every bad habit, because they have to diagnose the disease to save you. God's memory is diagnostic. He sees the cancer that the people are ignoring.
So his patience isn't blindness, it's a waiting room.
It's a window of opportunity. But the people were misinterpreting the waiting room as a clean bill of health.
This gets complicated for a Christian listener, though, and the source goes right at this. The whole point of the gospel is that the debt is paid. Love keeps no record of wrongs.
Right. How do you square those two things? God remembers all sin versus Jesus washed it all away.
So does he remember or not?
He remembers the cost. The source argues that grace isn't God suddenly thinking sin isn't a big deal. It's God seeing the full horror of sin and dealing with it completely at the cross.
Okay, I see. So if I use grace as an excuse to keep the elephant in the room?
You're basically mocking the cure. You're treating the antidote like a license to keep drinking the poison.
Yeah.
The source puts it this way. Grace does not excuse sin. Grace empowers us to leave it behind.
It becomes an identity crisis. If you're comfortable with the elephant, you've forgotten who you are now.
Exactly. You're acting as if the cross was insignificant.
So the whole point of this warning from Hosea and from the source isn't to shame people, it's an intervention.
It is. It's a splash of cold water. God is saying, I see it, so let's deal with it. And that leads to the call to action. The source gets very direct.
It says, do not assume that habitual sin goes unnoticed simply because you feel no immediate consequences.
That's the warning. But it also explains the why. God's patience has a purpose.
To lead you to repentance.
It's a pause, not permission. He wants restoration. But eventually, the elephant will destroy the room if it isn't dealt with.
So practically, what's the antidote? How do we get the elephant out?
The source calls it bringing the elephant into the light.
Which means what? Honest confession.
Yeah, but not just a vague, mumbled prayer. It means pointing directly at the thing, the habit, the compromise, and saying, this is wrong, and I am done with it.
It's the difference between shallow grace and deep grace. One is a cover-up, the other is a cleaning agent.
Perfect way to put it. And the most hopeful part of this whole analysis is what happens when we do that. When we finally admit the elephant is there.
What happened?
The God who remembers sin is the same God who delights to forgive.
He delights in it. He's not reluctant.
He wants to restore. But you have to agree with his diagnosis first. You have to admit you're sick before you can be healed.
So we've gone from the spiritual numbness of ancient Israel
To the mechanics of our own quiet compromise.
to the reality that God's silence isn't approval. He remembers because he cares.
And it all ends with an invitation. An invitation to be honest so that you can be healed.
It's amazing how a text about a kingdom that vanished thousands of years ago feels so current.
The human heart hasn't evolved past this. We are still prone to mistaking silence for safety. Real grace requires real truth.
So as we wrap this up, we want to leave you with a question that the source really pushes you toward.
Something to think about.
If there is an elephant in your own life, a habit, a compromise, something you've just grown comfortable with because, well, the sky hasn't fallen.
Are you interpreting the silence around that thing as safety? Or is it possible that you are just in the pause, the window of grace, before the consequence becomes unavoidable?
The difference might be whether you're willing to turn on the lights. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. See you next time.